Hi, I'm Taylor with Mom on the Spectrum, and in this video, I am sharing 16 ways to ask autistic people questions without tormenting us. This video is in response to the one I did previously called 46 Phrases That Upset Autistic Brains, and the response was huge. I had so many comments of people asking, okay, what questions can we actually ask that are helpful? And there were some people who were upset in the comments because they said, well, I don't think that the answer is expecting other people to change their language to support us. There's a balance between the two sides of this. So between asking others to accommodate us and between learning how to accommodate ourselves. But if there's an autistic person in your life and you want them to feel loved and seen and cared for, it's a beautiful thing to learn how to accommodate them. Okay, so number one, the first way that we can ask autistics questions without tormenting them is to attune to the situation. Here are some things that people in my community shared whenever I asked about ways to better communicate. It says, I guess most of our triggers also come from neurotypical people just not being attuned to us. So even if they have the safer phrases, it may still not be enough. The only solution would be for them to slow down, stop, reflect, attune to our way of being, and then maybe the safer phrase will spontaneously appear in their mind too. The second quote here, I keep coming back to, ask me nothing, just attune to me first. Take in my way of being. Let's just give ourselves some gentle space and see what emerges. It feels like any question without this presence is too hard for me to actually respond to. And the third one here, I personally need that attunement and connection of presence before my mind is able to open, and then questions and answers do arise for me from this space. So this was by far the number one thing that came through whenever I asked my autistic community for suggestions about how others can ask us questions. We just want to feel like you're attuned to us. Okay, just take a second to read the room, give it a beat before you just jump in and start asking questions. Number two, be clear about the reason behind your question. I've talked about this a lot on my channel. Identifying the why is so important for autistic people, and especially autistic children as they're learning in schools. Super important to help us understand the why. It's much easier for us to engage when we know that. Number three, realize you are probably interrupting an intense stream of consciousness. So I had this epiphany the other day that everything anyone says to me is an interruption, because even if it looks like I'm just sitting on the couch and doing nothing, my brain is going 100 miles an hour, observing patterns, thinking through solutions to problems that I've encountered during the day. I'm never just sitting there with an empty mind, blank canvas, ready for somebody to interject a question. So one thing that's brilliant that I actually heard about in one of my support groups that I run is somebody said that in their relationship, whenever their partner wants to ask them a question, they will knock on a surface close to them. So that just lets them know, hey, I have something that I need to say or share or ask. It gives them a second to kind of slow their thought process, shift to a different point of focus, and then be able to better receive the question. So that's really important with autistic people. Know that we're shifting from something else in our brain, and it might take us a second to re-navigate and refocus on what you're asking us. This is also really related to autistic inertia, which I talk a lot about on my channel. And speaking of that, I actually have on-demand classes. I'm so proud of these. So if you're looking to learn more about autism, check out my website, momonthespectrum.life/classes. I have an autistic inertia and demand avoidance class, a Meltdowns 101 class, and a How to Unmask course. So check those out. I have lots of information there if you're just wanting a better grip on how to navigate autistic life or support someone who's autistic in your life. I have a quote here from one of my community members that helps describe this experience of being interrupted. It says, I think that a lot of the statements require us to stop going on our merry way or just going along in our comfortable routine. And for us to answer, we have to come out of or dissolve our focus and then form or explain a context to get to the full and honest answer. What I've called the gear shift long before autism was on my radar at all. So that gear shift that I was taught, that gear shift here is what I was talking about with autistic inertia. Number four, understand it's difficult to toggle back and forth between interacting socially and retrieving information. This could be related to another term I talk about on the channel, safe versus flexible mode. So if you're asking me a question, I have to go from flexible mode where I'm like interacting socially with you and observing other social cues, other cues in the environment, to safe mode, which is where I can kind of clock out of the social demands and I can go deep dive into my brain and find the information that you're looking for. And it's really, really hard to go back and forth between those two things. If that's resonating with you, please let me know in the comments, because I struggle to find adequate words to communicate just how much brain space it takes up every day for me to toggle back and forth between those two spaces. And if this video is helpful to you while we're at it, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, that helps me out so much. That's just a free way that you can say, hey, thanks, this video meant something to me. I'm a single mom with 2 autistic kids. Every bit of it helps these resources reach more people and helps me be able to continue doing what I do. I love it. Thank you so much for your support. Number 5, provide context. Context, context, context. We love context and we love giving context. So if you ever ask us a question and we don't actually get to the answer until a few minutes later, it's because we felt like we needed to set it up so that you could fully understand where we're coming from and in which context this answer would be true. Okay, so if you're coming at us with a question, all right, what day does this apply to? What environment does this apply to? What group of people does this question apply to? The more specifics, the more context that you can provide for us, the easier it will be for us to retrieve that information for you. Autistics are generally so good at making connections that if you just give us an open question, our brain's just gonna go poof, and it's gonna be like a grid on a map with electricity of just poof, everything shooting out everywhere. So help us focus in, because we have a lot of information we can give you. What type of information, what context are you looking for? Number 6, be specific about information you'd like to know. So that kind of goes along with it. So rather than, hey, what was that book about? Something more specific would be, who were the main characters in that book? So narrow it down for us. In my brain, I feel like it's kind of organized like the old school Dewey Decimal System in the library, where you have to pull out drawers and like go through, see, I can't even find the word right now, go through like index cards to find the information. The information's there and I've got it for you. But sometimes I can't just like type on my keyboard and whip it up for you. I'm going to have to kind of go into the recesses of my brain and peruse a little bit to find that information for you. Number 7, avoid absolutes. This one is so important to me. It's so frustrating when people use absolutes, like tell me your favorite movie, tell me your favorite TV show, what's your favorite type of music or favorite artist. It's like, it depends on the day, it depends on what mood I'm in. A much easier question to ask, or a much easier question to answer, would be, what's one TV show you've been enjoying lately? Because if you ask us to give our favorite or the best, then it becomes about, okay, well, this better represent, my taste and the things that are important to me. And I want to communicate, this is my favorite TV show, because then we go into all of these qualifiers, right? And we want to make sure that we are accurately communicating the best thing, right? So, but that's not really what you want to know, right? You don't want to know our absolute favorite show. You want to know something that means something to us, right? What's a show that interests you? Okay. So just let it be one thing rather than our favorite thing. That kind of tends to shut us down. Number 8, give us time and space to answer. I'm going to share another quote from my community to help illustrate this. It says, I don't hate answering questions, but sometimes there's an urgency of response that some may not expect. I can actually enjoy these questions if I'm given the space to answer them properly. And by properly, I mean ample time for my delayed processing to give a response. If I'm rushed, there's the risk of providing an incomplete thought, an inaccurate thought, or in some cases, an emotional response, be it shutting down or an outburst. So a key thought to carry forward for anyone trying to bridge that communication gap is understanding the role delayed processing plays in being asked a question and the stress that comes with needing to provide an answer promptly. So along with this suggestion of giving us time and space to answer, I would also like to add, please don't add more questions or more commentary while we're trying to get the answer for you. If you ask us a question and then continue following it up with more input that we're trying to figure out what to do with socially, again, we're not able to go into our brains and access that information because we're still trying to navigate the social situation. So embrace silence for yourself while the autistic person in your life is getting that information for you. Take a few breaths, take some time to regulate yourself, and the answer will come when it comes. Number 9, understand we put a lot of time into why we do what we do and why we think what we think. Just because we seem uninterested or flippant doesn't mean we are. I'll just leave it at that. Number 10, don't make empty promises. So one of the phrases that I mentioned in my last video, that upsets us is, hey, let's get together soon. Let's grab coffee. Don't say that if you don't mean it. And be specific. Like, hey, next Monday, I'd love to grab coffee with you because it'd be great to talk more about this. Don't say, hey, let's go grab coffee if that's just a throwaway comment. We don't know what to do with that. It's like, okay, was that just a social nicety? Do you have something you want to talk to me about? It just, our brain doesn't really know what to do with that question. Again, generalization, but don't make empty promises. Number 11, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. The number one phrase that came through as the most upsetting phrase for autistic people in my last video was, how are you? And for me, that's an upsetting question because I don't feel like the people who ask that most of the time actually want the answer. It's just like a flippant kind of, hey, how are you? You know? And those questions are confusing to me. It's like, do you really want to know how I am? Do you want to take a second and like hear from me about how my day's gone and where I'm really at? Or do I just say, hey, fine? Because then that to me, now this is bringing something else up. Another generalization is that autistic people tend to be very big on communicating the truth and being authentic. And if I say I'm fine when I don't feel fine, then I get caught up in my head because I'm like, oh, that wasn't the truth. I feel weird for saying that. I wish I would have just been honest, but I don't know if they wanted me to be honest. See, that's where my brain goes. So don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. Number 12, offer choices when possible. So instead of what do you want for dinner, what would you rather have? Mac and cheese, hot dog, burger? This way, again, it helps narrow down the focus so we're not trying to scan the whole library in our brains for an answer. Number 13, avoid commenting on our appearance or our behaviors. So one of the phrases in my last video that upsets us is, hey, you seem really quiet. Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, am I not supposed to be quiet? Did I do something wrong? Is my face making a weird expression? The fear of being perceived or the idea of being perceived is very uncomfortable for most autistic people. So as soon as we realize that we're being perceived, like we're communicating something that we didn't know we were communicating, then we get in our heads and we get pulled out of the ability to be there with you and be present in communication. We get pulled into kind of dissecting what's going on and overthinking our mannerisms, which is a really uncomfortable place to be for most autistic people. Number 14, don't assume laziness, incompetence, or indifference. And here's another quote from someone in my community to help illustrate this. It says, I think a big disconnect between myself and those of my friends who may not understand me is that I don't think they realize just how much thought I put into things, like why I do things the way I do, or why I act the way I do. So one of the upsetting phrases in the other video was, why aren't you listening? Or can you please listen to me? Or why are you doing things that way? It's this idea that we're kind of checked out or we don't really care. But we are actually putting a great deal of thought into why we do what we do. And it's really important to us that there's a great sense of purpose within us that often is lost in communication. Number 15, get curious about why we process information the way we do and what value it could add to your world. Is the way we process information, does it sometimes come across as strange and different? I'm sure it does, but I'm asking, please approach that with a spirit of curiosity rather than judgment. There's so many fascinating things about how an autistic brain works, and the more curious you can be about that, really the more we can open up and share with you. And I truly believe there are so many things that the autistic community can bring to the world around us to enhance others' lives and just the way that we're able to process and exchange information. And number 16, understand that neurotypical communication is not the right way to communicate. So I say this because there's kind of sometimes this idea, especially in the workplace, when I get to speak in workplaces about neurodiversity and education, there's kind of this idea that we need to bring neurodivergent people up to our level. And if they could just understand how to communicate here, then we could all move forward. There's no levels. There's no levels. Levels, Jerry, levels. There's no hierarchy of correct ways of communicating or being in the world. There's just differences. So, and I said neurotypicals because how do you really define a typical brain? That's a question that I don't want to be in charge of answering. So my point here is just there's no right way of communicating. And if we can stay curious about how to learn from all different forms of communication, we can really help each other feel more seen, more validated. When we create these types of spaces, I get really excited as a creative because creativity goes through the roof. Trust, authenticity, vulnerability, healing, like people just making connections and feeling good All of these things improve whenever we're able to create spaces where others feel safe and validated and welcome to share their ideas. And I loved this quote that also came in from my online community, which I'll share a link to in the description if you want to check out. There's a 7-day free trial. There's like hundreds of us. It's so cool. Such a cool place. They said, a note to those who struggle with questions. One way that I've gotten better with being asked these questions is having developed a lack of shame around disappearing in the depths of my mind to pull together an answer. The answers I give tend to be fairly complete and authentic, and I've come to love my well thought out responses more than I hate sitting there looking like I've lost power to the mainframe. And that just makes me so happy because that's what I'm all about, helping us reduce shame and embrace our true authentic autistic selves because they're beautiful. So in the next video, I'm going to be sharing ways that we can accommodate ourselves as autistic people in conversations where questions are asked that might make us feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So very empowering strategies coming for you in the next video. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.